This case took place in a residential area on Xintai Road in the Xinzhuang district of New Taipei City, Taiwan. On April 17, 2008, a high school student named Ping Guo returned home from school as usual. As soon as she stepped inside, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Her mother wasn't there to greet her as usual, and the house was eerily quiet. Ping Guo began to feel uneasy. She called out for her mother several times but received no response. She walked to her mother's room and gently pushed open the door. What she saw was a horrifying scene that would likely haunt her forever. Her mother was bound hand and foot with tape, lying face down naked on the bed, with blood stains all over the mattress. Fighting back her fear and grief, Ping Guo shakily called the police. Upon receiving the report, police and emergency personnel quickly arrived at the scene. After an initial examination, they confirmed that Ping Guo's mother had been brutally murdered. There was a deep wound on her neck, clearly indicating death by throat cutting. The police immediately secured the crime scene and began a thorough investigation. At the scene, they discovered a fruit knife and scissors suspected to be the murder weapons. The room showed signs of being searched. Police initially believed this might be a robbery-murder case. They theorized that a thief had broken in when no one was home, unexpectedly encountering the homeowner returning early. When confronted with the sudden appearance of the homeowner, the thief might have panicked and committed the brutal murder. Additionally, given the victim's naked state, police suspected she might have been sexually assaulted before death. However, specific details would have to wait for the forensic report. The victim, Ye Kuifeng, was 46 years old and had previously run a coffee wholesale business with her husband. Their marriage had been harmonious, but tragically, her husband had died of a heart attack 3 years earlier. For Kuifeng, this was a devastating blow. After her husband's death, she lost her support system and the coffee business had to cease operations. Fortunately, thanks to savings from their previous business, Kuifeng was able to maintain a living and raise her 2 daughters alone. At the time of the incident, her older daughter was studying at university in Chiayi, while her younger daughter Ping Guo lived with her. The forensic report soon arrived. It revealed that the victim had 23 knife wounds from her chin to neck, with the fatal wound being a 2.4-inch deep cut that caused severe bleeding. The victim ultimately died from excessive blood loss and respiratory failure. Additionally, forensics discovered a curved mark on Kuifeng's left cheek, suggesting this was a fingernail mark left when the killer pressed their hand against her face. There was also minor bleeding under her scalp, indicating her head had been struck. Notably, semen was found in the victim's body. Police initially thought this was a robbery homicide, but further investigation made this scenario unlikely. First, there were no signs of forced entry on the windows or doors of the victim's home. Second, the family dog hadn't barked at the time of the incident, suggesting the killer was someone familiar to the victim. While the scene showed signs of being searched, the mobile phone and loose cash on the table weren't taken. Most importantly, the residential area where the victim lived had strict security measures. The complex had a large iron gate, but for convenience, only a side gate was used for daily resident access. Additionally, security guards were on duty 24/7, and all visitors had to register. These circumstances made police suspect the crime was likely committed by someone the victim knew. Therefore, police immediately went to the security office to check the visitor log and surveillance footage from that day. Indeed, through the surveillance cameras, they spotted a suspicious man. The footage showed that at 1:51 p.m. that day, a man wearing a checkered shirt and baseball cap, head down while on his phone, had taken advantage of the security guard's momentary inattention to slip into the complex with other residents. 2 minutes later, this man entered the elevator and quickly turned to press the button for the 6th floor, the floor where Kuifeng lived. Unfortunately, because he was wearing a cap, the cameras couldn't capture his face. At 5:29 p.m., the man left the complex carrying a white plastic bag. This timing coincided with when Ye Kuifeng was murdered. Police immediately made this person their primary suspect. To further identify the suspect, police called in the victim's daughter Ping Guo to review the surveillance footage. Surprisingly, as soon as she saw the images, Ping Guo immediately recognized the man as Uncle Jishan, someone they knew well. Ping Guo revealed to police that they had been neighbors with Uncle Jishan, and since her father's death, he had frequently visited her mother and shown great concern for both her and her sister. Based on Pingguo's description, police quickly identified the suspect. The suspect was Lin Jishan, 45 years old, married with 2 children. His main business was in mainland China, so he frequently traveled between Taiwan and China. Initially, police worried he might have already left Taiwan, but after checking immigration records, they discovered he was still in the country. Therefore, the police's primary task was to quickly locate Jishan. Initially, police thought they could quickly determine Jishan's location through phone tracking, but Jishan seemed well-versed in police surveillance techniques. His phone would turn on and off intermittently, making it difficult to pinpoint his location. Even when Jishan's phone occasionally turned on, it appeared to be deliberately misleading police tracking efforts. In fact, after the murder, Jishan had been continuously hiding in various locations around Taipei. After the incident, Jishan's phone signal first appeared in the Sanchong area. Police immediately investigated, but by the time they arrived, the signal had moved to Jinshan at Jishan's house. Police rushed to Jishan's home in Jinshan, but were again too late, as Jishan had already fled. At Jishan's house, police found blood-stained clothes he had changed out of. At this point, police were certain Jishan was the murderer. When questioning Jishan's wife, police received an important lead. During his escape, Jishan had sent a lengthy text message to his wife explaining the incident. In the message to his wife, Jishan admitted to having an affair with Ye Kuifeng, the victim. He claimed that Kuifeng had been pressuring him to divorce his wife and frequently sent him inappropriate videos. He wanted to end the relationship, but she refused. In the message, he mentioned that the day before the incident, when he returned to Taiwan from China, he had tried to end things peacefully with Kuifeng but couldn't convince her. Instead, Kuifeng threatened him to come to her house at 11 a.m. the next day, or there would be consequences. Jishan said that when their negotiation failed again the next afternoon, Kuifeng threatened to never let his family live in peace. In a moment of lost control, Jishan punched her. Then Kuifeng suddenly clutched her chest, painfully saying she was having a heart attack and asking Jishan to get her medicine. But Jishan thought Kuifeng was just acting to gain sympathy, so he took no action. However, the situation suddenly deteriorated when Kuifeng unexpectedly collapsed on the floor, motionless. Jishan quickly checked but found Kuifeng had stopped breathing. At that moment, he realized Kuifeng might have actually died from heart disease. However, because the residential complex had surveillance cameras everywhere, he knew Kuifeng's death would definitely be linked to him. So he devised a plan to stage the scene as a robbery murder. He first used tape to bind Kuifeng's hands and feet, then took a knife and cut her throat. Because the knife was dull, it only caused some small wounds, but then he discovered Kuifeng wasn't dead and had awakened from the pain of the knife wounds. After waking up, Kuifeng began screaming loudly, so in panic, Jishan stabbed her multiple times. After reading Jishan's message to his wife, police weren't entirely convinced of its truthfulness. The urgent task remained finding Jishan. Because his phone signal kept changing locations, police were constantly being led around. To ensure Jishan's phone stayed on so they could accurately determine his location, police employed a strategy of having the victim's daughter Pingguo send him messages in a gentle tone. Surprisingly, Jishan responded to Pingguo's messages. He replied, "It's too late now to apologize to Kuifeng and her children. I will pay with my life. Give me a few days. No need to wait for legal punishment. I will pay with my life." But then his tone changed. "That day your mother said you had grown up and were very good, ranking in the top 15 of your school. I hope you 2 sisters will support each other. Don't let your mother down. I have nothing more to say." Pingguo was very angry when she saw such a response. She didn't understand what Jishan meant. He was a murderer, yet was advising the sisters to support each other. Was he trying to comfort them? However, to encourage Jishan to surrender voluntarily, Pingguo suppressed her anger and continued messaging him. "Uncle, you need to give us an explanation. You can't just kill someone and then tell us to support each other and think that's enough. That doesn't help. We're all waiting for your explanation. Please, can you appear quickly?" Tomorrow is Mother's funeral. I want to resolve this quickly so Mother can rest in peace. Jishan then sent Pingguo a message explaining what had happened. In the message to Pingguo, he wrote, "I'm truly sorry, I really didn't mean to. At that time, I should have been calmer, should have gone to save your mother. What I'm telling you now is all true. I have no reason to lie to you. Last year, around May or June, I gave your mother 600,000 new Taiwan dollars, approximately 20,000 US dollars, to invest in a fund. Recently, because I was facing some financial difficulties, I asked your mother to sell the fund so I could use the capital. She agreed. I came back to Taiwan on Wednesday, and when I went to your house, your mother told me she had sold the fund a few days before and received the money. When I came to your house the next day, your mother suddenly said the money was gone and threw her bank book at me to see. In anger, I punched her in the back. Then she screamed about having a heart attack and asked me to get medicine, but I thought she was just pretending, so I didn't pay attention." The subsequent description of events by Jishan basically matched what he had told his wife earlier. The main difference between his explanations to his wife and Pingguo was the motive for the crime. In his explanation to Pingguo, the reason was that Kuifeng had spent the money he urgently needed, causing him to angrily strike her. But in the message to his wife, he said it was because Kuifeng had been pursuing him and pressuring him to divorce, causing him to lose control and punch her. Police currently found it difficult to judge the truthfulness of these two messages. However, in both messages, Jishan mentioned that he had returned to Taiwan from China the day before the incident, April 16th. Police then extracted surveillance footage from April 16th and discovered that Jishan had indeed returned from China that day and gone straight to the victim's home. However, on the way, Jishan had stopped at a supermarket and bought a roll of tape before going to Kuifeng's house. Shockingly, this roll of tape matched exactly with the tape used to bind the victim. This important discovery led police to suspect that Jishan's actions were not a momentary loss of control, but had been premeditated, completely contradicting what he had described in his previous messages. At this point, the detective in charge of the case directly messaged Jishan urging him to surrender, mentioning that cooperating with police now might give him a chance for a reduced sentence. However, Jishan arrogantly replied that he worked in telecommunications and the police couldn't easily catch him. He even boastfully declared that in a few days he would openly board a plane and leave the country. Actually, through these message exchanges, police had detected that Jishan's phone signal frequently appeared in the Jiaoxi area of Yilan. Police quickly went to Yilan and, upon arrival, split into multiple teams. One team investigated hotels in Yilan, while others maintained 24-hour surveillance at train stations and major intersections in Jiaoxi to prevent the suspect from escaping. However, after several days, the police search in Yilan showed no progress. Just as police were beginning to doubt whether Jishan was still in Jiaoxi, the case had an important breakthrough. That day, police spotted a man buying cigarettes in a convenience store whose appearance closely matched suspect Jishan. Police approached to inquire and asked the man for identification. The man insisted he wasn't Jishan but rather Jishan's brother and produced his driver's license. Police carefully examined the ID the man provided. The more they looked, the more they felt the photo on it didn't match the man before them. Instead, the man's appearance was very similar to the suspect Jishan they were seeking. However, unable to completely confirm the man's identity, police hadn't taken any forceful measures. At this point, the man requested to use the bathroom. Since they hadn't confirmed his identity, police couldn't let him leave like that, so they assigned 2 officers to accompany him to a nearby store to use their bathroom. On the way to the bathroom, the man suddenly stopped, saying he had something important to report directly to the team leader. The team leader was in a police car nearby. After the man was brought to the car, the team leader directly asked, "You are Jishan, aren't you?" At this point, the man no longer tried to hide and directly admitted, "Yes." Subsequently, Jishan was taken by police to the hotel where he was staying for a search. At the hotel, police found the victim Kuifeng's identification documents, bank book, and bank cards. Knowing he could no longer escape, Jishan revealed the whole truth about his complicated relationship with Kuifeng. It turned out that Jishan and Ye Kuifeng had known each other many years before. At that time, Jishan was serving in the military in Kinmen, while Kui Feng was working at an ice cream shop. Because of her beauty, she was admired by many soldiers stationed there. Among them was Jishan, who had pursued Kui Feng passionately and confessed his feelings multiple times but was always rejected. Later, Jishan completed his military service and they lost contact. As time passed, they both married and had their own families. However, after all those years, Jishan's feelings for Kui Feng had never faded. Surprisingly, Jishan learned through inquiries that Kui Feng had bought a small villa by the beach in Jinshan. Actually, Kui Feng and her family normally lived in Xinjiang District, New Taipei City, where the murder occurred. The villa in Jinshan was really just a place for Kui Feng and her family to rest during holidays. To get close to the woman he had secretly loved for years, Jishan bought a villa opposite Kui Feng's house, living near his dream woman. His purpose was to create accidental encounters. In 2003, Jishan moved into his new house in Jinshan with a carefully calculated plan. Day after day, he patiently waited for seemingly chance encounters with Kui Feng. Fate seemed to smile on Jishan's schemes when Kui Feng couldn't hide her surprise and emotion at meeting an old acquaintance after so many years, now become her neighbor. From casual social conversations, they gradually became closer. Jishan, though married, deliberately kept this secret and once again devoted himself to pursuing the woman who had rejected him in the past. At that time, happiness was still smiling on Kui Feng's small family. Her marital relationship was still as beautiful as in the early days, so she firmly rejected all of Jishan's romantic advances. But then fate turned cruel when in 2005, Kui Feng's husband suddenly passed away from a heart attack. The pain of losing her life partner shattered her spirit, and the following days were immersed in grief and loneliness. The seaside villa in Jinshan, once witness to her small family's happy moments, now only held sad memories. Jishan saw an opportunity in Kui Feng's pain. He understood this was when she was at her most vulnerable and lonely, and with the sophistication of a predator, Jishan gradually worked his way into Kui Feng's broken heart. However, Jishan always hid from Kui Feng that he was married. To his wife, he lied that he needed to work in China. Since Jishan frequently did business in China, his wife was used to this and didn't ask many questions. Subsequently, Jishan and Kui Feng began a passionate affair. Jishan often stayed overnight at Kui Feng's home, and Kui Feng's daughters also knew Jishan, affectionately calling him Uncle Jishan. During their relationship, because Jishan's business in China wasn't going well and frequently suffered losses, he continuously borrowed money from Kui Feng to cover capital shortfalls. However, when the company was profitable, he did once give Kui Feng 600,000 new Taiwan dollars, approximately 20,000 US dollars, to invest in a fund. But such situations were rare. Most often he was borrowing money from Kui Feng. As time passed, due to Jishan's constant demands for money from Kui Feng, their relationship began to show cracks. During one argument, Jishan accidentally revealed that he was married. Kui Feng couldn't accept becoming the other woman and decided to end the relationship with Jishan, demanding he repay the money he had borrowed previously. However, Kui Feng never received any money back from Jishan. Meanwhile, Jishan didn't want to break up with Kui Feng. To escape Jishan's harassment, Kui Feng stopped answering any of his calls or messages. Unexpectedly, Jishan directly returned from China to Taiwan, went to Kui Feng's residential complex, and stood below her floor, sending threatening messages. "Either let me come up, or I'll go find your daughter. You choose. If you don't see your daughter for a few days, that's my doing." Faced with such threats, Kui Feng was forced to give in and let Jishan up. In the end, they didn't successfully break up, but reconciled instead. However, Kui Feng set one condition. Jishan had to divorce his wife. She believed this was the only way they could have a long-term future together. Although Jishan outwardly agreed to this demand, he took no actual steps to follow through. Later, because Jishan's business in China needed a large amount of capital, he asked Kui Feng to sell the 600,000 new Taiwan dollar investment fund to resolve his company's urgent financial difficulties. Kui Feng agreed at the time. On the afternoon of April 16, 2008, one day before the murder, Jishan specifically returned to Taiwan from China with the purpose of reclaiming the 600,000 new Taiwan dollars from Kuifeng. That day, he first stopped at a supermarket to buy tape, then went to Kuifeng's residential complex. Jishan explained to police that he bought the tape because Kuifeng had special preferences, and the tape was just to add excitement. That evening, they used the tape at Kuifeng's home. After finishing, Jishan brought up the money issue, and Kuifeng said they would discuss it the next day. The next day, the day of the murder, around 1 p.m., Jishan came to Kuifeng's home. They had intimate relations again. Afterward, when Jishan brought up the money again, Kuifeng suddenly said the money was all spent. Upon hearing this, Jishan lost control and had a violent argument with Kuifeng. What happened afterward matched what Jishan had described in his messages to his wife and Pingguo. He thought Kuifeng had died from a heart condition, so he deliberately staged the scene to look like a robbery murder. However, during the initial trial, Jishan suddenly changed his previous testimony. In court, Jishan said that Kuifeng had actually committed. He claimed that day, while arguing with Kuifeng, she suddenly lost emotional control, ran to the kitchen, and grabbed a fruit knife and scissors. Then, in an extremely agitated state, Kuifeng used the scissors to stab her own neck. Jishan said he had rushed to press his hand against the wound, but Kuifeng gradually lost her breath and heartbeat. Jishan said he was very frightened then, knowing that Kuifeng's death in his presence would not only implicate him in the case, but would also leave her 2 daughters without support. Therefore, he decided to stage the scene as a robbery murder. This way, at least Kuifeng's daughters could receive their mother's insurance money. However, Jishan's latest testimony completely contradicted the forensic report. According to the examination report, the fatal neck wound on Kuifeng was 2.4 inches deep and 1.2 inches wide. Meanwhile, the scissors found at the scene were double-bladed with plastic coating, with a maximum width of only 0.8 inches. Therefore, this fatal wound clearly couldn't have been caused by the scissors. Furthermore, the bleeding under Kuifeng's scalp was consistent with Jishan's earlier testimony about punching her and causing her to fall unconscious. Additionally, the fingernail mark on Kuifeng's cheek led forensics to speculate that this mark could have been made when Jishan pressed her head down as she regained consciousness and struggled while he was cutting her throat. Based on this collective evidence, the judge didn't believe testimony but rather believed Jishan's earlier confession, that he had knocked Kuifeng unconscious with his fist, then bound her with tape and killed her. The judge also pointed out that the defendant and Kuifeng were lovers at the time. If the defendant had no intention to kill when Kuifeng regained consciousness, he should have immediately untied her and taken her to the hospital. That would have been a normal human reaction. Moreover, regarding the defendant's defense that he did this so Kuifeng's 2 daughters could receive insurance money, the judge said, "How could someone willingly bear the serious crime of murder for 2 people unrelated to him?" After committing such a serious crime, the defendant should have shown remorse, apologized to the victim, begged for forgiveness, and accepted legal punishment. However, the defendant instead tried to fabricate a story about insurance money to rationalize his actions. Such a defense was clearly unreasonable and also showed he had no intention of repenting. Finally, the judge sentenced Lin Jishan to life imprisonment. Jishan was dissatisfied with the sentence and appealed, but the Supreme Court rejected his appeal. And that's the case for today. What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out on other exciting cases. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next videos.